I am Therese Hegel with ASI, and I have a great panel, and I think everybody on it is unmuted, so we're good to go. I have Liz Wimbush from PPAI, Caity Baumann from BDA, and Eric Henry of TS Designs. And we're going to be talking about the importance of transparency in print, promo, and apparel. So I'd love, Liz, could you start out and just talk a little bit about your role and how transparency shows up in your work? And then we'll kind of go down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Liz Wimbush. I'm PPAI's Director of Sustainability and Responsibility, and I'm the first one in the role. So I've been here for about 2.5 years now. And prior to that, I come from the industry. I was at a distributorship in Canada. So I really understand the importance and how the evolution of that narrative around transparency and sustainability claims has happened. So I work in the sustainability and compliance overlap, the regulatory space that Cassie was talking about a little bit. It's becoming increasingly important, the part of the transparency conversation for branded merch with truth in advertising laws and regulations aimed at minimizing greenwashing. They're really just becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah. So Caity, what about you? How does transparency show up in your work?
Yeah, so I actually work in our business development group at BDA, and I lead our corporate sustainability. And it might seem like a weird marriage, but for anyone who's worked in business development, you know that it gives you a perspective on the business that you don't have if you're only in operations. And so I have the opportunity to see what existing clients are looking for in their programs and partners, what potential clients are looking for, what are clients asking for during renewals, and then what are account teams who are on the front lines hearing from their clients on a daily basis. And so for us, transparency shows up kind of at every level on a daily basis. Because we are a distributor, clients are really interested both in what BDA does as a corporate entity, how are our business practices responsible and sustainable, and then they want to understand how we're engaging with our supply chain. Do we have partners who can show those proof over promises in their products? And that looks really different, what clients are looking for from that aspect. So we're seeing it across the business as both a company and within our supply chain.
Right. And Eric, I know transparency is huge with your company. I think that's one of the first reasons I ever reached out to you is because I was doing something about, dirt to shirt and transparent supply chains. But tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, Eric Henry, and happy Earth Day, based in Burlington, North Carolina. And the painting behind me is a cotton farmer we've been working with for, over 20 years now. So being in North Carolina, which I say one of the best places in the world at the intersection of agriculture and apparel, and when our business got wiped off the map with NAFTA in 1994, I says, why would we go overseas for cotton that we can grow right here in North Carolina? So again, transparency is the core to what we do here. And from the earlier conversation, I think with all the certifications out there, I like to say transparency with, certification without transparency, you have to question the certification. So, and again, it's just, we're very fortunate that we live in an area that we can actually connect the cotton all the way to t-shirts. And we do that in a supply chain now of 700 miles, where some t-shirts today travel 40,000 miles from that field to your shirt.
Yeah, that's amazing. Such a 700 miles is so much smaller. So I mean, this panel is about like proof over promises, but what does proof actually look like in the context of sustainable merch and apparel? I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it with certifications and things like that, but what else is kind of proof for people? And why don't we start with you, Eric, and we'll go back down the line.
Well, again, as I said, we launched Cotton to Carolinas in the mid-90s, and that was way before things like QR codes exist. Fast forward to today, we actually print a QR code in our shirt. You can scan that QR code, and that will take you all the way back to that farmer. When I tell you farmer, I give you a picture, phone number, physical address, and email. We've had every brand in the world come to TS Designs. You're welcome to do it. And they talk about their sustainability and And I like to say we live in a global economy, not putting that genie back in the bottle. But when I buy those pair of jeans from some brand that are made in Bangladesh, I'm fine with Bangladesh. What I'm not fine with is the ability to access that facility in Bangladesh that made those pair of jeans. They make it very, very difficult. And so the brands a lot of times hide behind a very outdated Karen content thing that says made in Bangladesh, but that could be North Carolina cotton. So we're really failing on the transparency because we have a lot better technology today that allow us to into that. And again, I have no problem with the global economy. What I have a problem is the lack of transparency into that supply chain. And I'll leave it one other thing, and being this a long time, the old guy in this conversation, one advantage or outcome, I should say, that comes transparent is the relationships you develop with the people in your supply chain. It's not just a PO and a price. There's a relationship to that farmer there. I mean, I'm now working on the third generation. I'm 20. I know the family. I know the kids. I know where they live. I've been to their home. And those relationships are so critical, especially when we're in these challenging, chaotic times. So you're not solely looking at a business decision based upon price.
Right. Caity, what about you? What does proof look like?
So we all know the gold standard are companies, like Arabs, right? Where there is that deep dive. There are LCAs, there are carbon footprints, the traceability is undeniable. But we work in a storied industry, right? And not everybody is there. And so for kids who absolutely require that, we work with our partners who can provide that level of transparency. But what I've really seen over the last 5 years, from a corporate partner perspective, right? Clients who are coming for you not just for a single order, but they are wanting a long-term relationship. They want to understand how you can support their corporate ESG goals as well. And so knowing that scope 3, so most companies in this industry is going to be 80+% of their footprint. We need to meet them in between. And so for us, one of the things that we do is we measure our scope 1, 2, and 3 every year. We do public disclosure through CDP. And what we are able to provide clients, again, progress over perfection, is we can give them a percentage of, can attribute a percentage of the carbon footprint to the business that we're doing with them so that they can make progress towards those sustainability goals. And then we're able to also measure and report on improvements that we make every year within our footprint that impacts them. So it's definitely kind of a dual path. Neither one is perfect, but we're trying to fix a plane while we're flying it. And so we can't wait for perfection. Anything that we can do to help one another take steps forward, I call that a win. At the same time, as an industry, we need to hold hands. And one thing I do want to acknowledge on this panel, because it was very overwhelming for me when I started in sustainability, was I felt like I was surrounded by these people who were so far down this path, and they were speaking this language that I didn't understand. And I felt like I'm never going to get there. And I think it's really important for us to hold hands and be able to tell others in the industry there are starting points, and they're not as overwhelming as you might think they are. And those starting points will help you build your path forward. And so I want people to hear that today, that we all started somewhere, and we can help advise on what first steps look like, because I think that is a huge barrier to entry, and for a lot of companies, why they're not more involved in sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've noticed writing about sustainability the last few years is that everybody who's involved in it is very willing to talk, very willing to share. They want to be able to educate it because it's not talked about as much as it should be. So if you show an interest, they're definitely going to want to tell you all about it and help you in any way they can. Liz, what about you? What do you think about, like, how does proof show up for kind of the industry as a whole?
I think the big things for me are practice what you preach. Kind of sums it up really well. Like verified claims with data to back it up, substantiated data, and all of it communicated with confidence and, ideally minimal buzzwords, which can get tricky, but as we've touched on earlier in this, the alphabet soup can be really intimidating. We want to try and stay away from that being part of what confuses the clarity in our transparency claims. So I would say, practice what you preach and consider what holds up to an audit, and having that as kind of a standard for transparency claims.
Yeah. I mean, the storytelling that is so nice for the marketing purposes, I think, can still be a part of sustainability, but it's meaningless if you don't have that data to back it up. But of course, I think there is still a lot of greenwashing in the industry and just all industries. So where are we still kind of relying too heavily on, like, the promises and the stories instead of that proof that we need? And Liz, we'll start with you and then go back. Just
Sure.
kind of going back.
So I think there should be a really clear distinction in transparency claims on what is accomplished or what is in place now versus what is aspirational. Knowing that you have verified social audits, or that you can fall back on, if necessary, to answer a hyper-specific RFP question, is different than publicly broadcasting on your website all of your manufacturer's contact details. I think, like Eric said, it would be incredible if we get to a place collectively where we all have access to that information so that we know where everything is coming from. But right now, it's just not the reality of the bulk of our industry and many others. A lot of audit schemes like SMETA and BSCI help account for those data gaps. Then there's transparency and environmental impact data. If you look to Europe, there's legislation, like we said, around digital product passports, and that will very soon start impacting our industry. Even if you don't sell there, setting your compliance bar to hit a level at that standard will help keep you ahead. And our industry has a unique gap in communication, where we don't often get to communicate directly with the people who get the stuff that we make, like the end users who get it. They're usually not the buyers making the decisions. So we need to find solid ways, like digital product passports, to ensure that we can clearly and efficiently communicate to those people, so that we all collectively work to dispel the kind of brand fill reputation that we're pushing back against.
Right. Caity, what about you? Where are we still relying too heavily on the promises and the stories and not the, hard claims?
Yeah, I agree with everything Liz just said, and she hit on something really key, which is, that end buyer isn't always the end user, right? And so how the buyer is incentivized matters, right? Budgets matter. And so I think that's where we as an industry, the more we can innovate to make sustainable practices more broadly available and accessible during manufacturing, during production, we can start to see those economies of scale to make it an easier decision for those end buyers. In terms of promises over proof, it goes back to what I touched on earlier. I see a lot of really positive intent with our supply chain, but being willing to take those steps and actually measure and show us how you are doing in your business practices is a really key first step, I think, for so many in the industry. And I will say EcoVadis is pretty well known throughout our industry. Certainly seeing, an uptick of that on the client side as well. It's very well known. That is an excellent first step for a company to take, is to go through the EcoVadis assessment and share that rating And EcoVadis, this year has come out and said, anytime you share your badge, you need to also share your sustainability ratings page, with it. And I think it's not a ton of information, but it is a level of transparency that wasn't there previously. And I think companies get really stuck on, I don't want to reveal what we're not doing well, but it's got to be a mindset shift that it's not about where you're at in this moment. It's about where you're going, and it's about how you're preparing yourself to go there. And if you can look at those assessments and those results as a gift for your roadmap, it will change the trajectory and it will make it so much easier to move forward. So I would say if you're not doing any type of measurement today and you're really relying on promises, that is a great place to start with proof.
Yeah. So I had like a ton more questions for you guys, but of course we have limited time. So I want to just give Eric like the chance to kind of the final word about proof, but also just, how can more people in the industry get to that place of radical transparency and dirt to shirt and just like, what does it take operationally to change this industry? Just answer that for us, Eric. No big deal.
Well, one of our taglines around TS Designs is sustainability is a journey, not a destination. And all we're looking for, this is not winners or losers, but are you on that pathway? Do you understand what your impact is? Another thing I like to say to this group here, everybody, most days you have a choice. The food you eat, the clothes you wear, and the energy you use. Be aware, not just what it costs, not because it looks cool, not because everybody's doing it, but understand the impact. And understand, too, change is okay. I'll leave an example. 10 years ago, we had developed a brand called Carolina Blend. It was going to be 50% recycled PET from South Carolina, water bottles, and 50% North Carolina cotton. Well, we learned about microplastics. We walked away from plastic because we know plastic is a problem. The UN says it's going to triple the amount in the next 10 years. So again, it's just being aware, and small changes are great. And again, it's and somebody said earlier, it is a journey. You're never going to get there. But if you're constantly aware of your, again, energy, clothes, and food every day, then you can connect with it a little bit differently and you can make better choices.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, you guys, this was a great panel. I could talk about it all day, but they won't let me. So maybe we can do this again sometime.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a great Earth Day.
Thank you.